know that a lot of people talk about this. They talk about who was the greater fighter. Was it Mayweather? Was it Pacquiao? Um, I always thought, personally, I always thought my sort of like 2 second thought was, well, Mayweather beat Pacquiao, so I guess that's the end of the story. But the more I read some of the other arguments, it becomes a little bit more difficult to determine. So, Mike, what's your take on it?
I say Pacquiao had more worldwide impact. Not only did he galvanize his whole country, the Philippines, and by the way, I still stick to the prediction that some year soon, he's going to be president of the Philippines. He's a senator right now, and he's coming along in government. With his popularity, he will get elected president if he wants to, and I think he does want to. I can't imagine Mayweather being elected president of the local dog pound, but Mayweather is, having said that, the greatest fighter of his generation, a skill set above and beyond every one of his contemporaries, including Pacquiao. Pacquiao's a lot more. It's like if you had an electoral college vote, it would be Mayweather. If it was a popular vote, it would be Pacquiao.
Well, that's always the question for me is how do you determine greatness? I mean, if we're talking skill, are we just talking skill? Are we talking impact? If we're talking financial success, I mean, Mayweather beats everybody hands down, right? I don't know, was there anybody more financially successful than Mayweather in the history of boxing?
Not only that, he also owns a strip club and a roller skating rink.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever.
Which I know were always ambitions of yours, but
yeah. I even had a no. But in terms of, so here are some of the arguments that people make. Okay, so one of them is that the 50-0 mark. They go with the 50-0.
That got to do with it. That's based on 49-0 Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano was a heavyweight from 50 years ago. How is that relevant?
Well, I mean, that, and, then people start going, well, if you go 50-0, then Chavez was 80, what was he, 86-0 or something. And the argument there is, I mean, like weren't half the guys that Julio Cesar Chavez fought, they're like cab drivers. I mean, you don't know what they're, so.
We just, that was a famous line. I was in the ring with Greg Haugen after he got the crap beat out of him in Mexico City by Chavez, and the TV interviewer said, "Greg, you said that Chavez's opponents had all been Tijuana cab drivers or Mexican cab drivers." Haugen looked into the camera. His face was all purple and blue and black, all kinds of bruises and scrapes. And Haugen had the wit to say, "Yeah, but those were tough damn cab drivers."
Yeah. So I mean, the numbers. I mean, the numbers themselves.
We just talked about Butterbean. Butterbean was at one point what, 15-0, something like that. With the matchmaking, the top rank, and Bruce Trampler and Ron Katz, until they got stumbled upon Mitch Rose, who upset Butterbean. Butterbean could have been 100-0. Would that make him the greatest fighter ever?
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, the argument about just the numbers themselves is, it's like, I'm saying Mayweather had a very quality record. If you look at his record, he only had 3 fighters, I think, that had losing records, and he had a bunch of champions. I mean, 24 champions or something. So I think it's the substance in the record as opposed to the number itself.
Well, let me talk about the record. You talk about who fought so many champions. Today we have 5, 6, 7 world governing bodies. You can have 7, 8 world champions in each weight division.
Exactly. That's another thing. Yeah.
I never thought in my lifetime I'd see boxing have more title belts than wrestling does, but it does.
Yeah. No. But look. It's not the word champions, because that goes back to the argument people make. Well, Pacquiao's an 8-division champ. Well, yeah, but there's like all these new divisions. They have all these belts. So it's kind of, I'm not saying it's not an accomplishment, but from that standpoint, it's easier to become an 8-division champ now than it was to be like a 3-division champ maybe, 30 years ago?
Or how about 40? How about the age of Emil Griffith, Dick Tiger, Jose Torres, those kind of guys. There was one world champion and there were 10 weight divisions. You had the flyweight, the heavyweight, and you had the two junior division, junior welterweight and junior lightweight.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So what I'm saying is like,
if you're in a world where there's eight world champions or 10 world champions, or even say let's 12. Today there's 58, 68, 108.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
ridiculous.
So exactly. So when you say, well, he's an 8 division world champion, I mean, again, you're looking at exactly who he fought, who he beat. And I'm not saying that these guys fought bums. I mean, the record on Pacquiao and Mayweather is phenomenal. You know, they've beaten some really great fighters. You know, like, I mean, for instance, with Mayweather, I always say, I mean, listen, Diego Corrales, like, was undefeated, you know, Diego, you know, and then Canelo, he has some great wins, and so does Pacquiao. You know, I mean, that has nothing to do with the number of fights that, you know, 50-0, or the number of divisions they were in, you know, or anything like that. You know, it's like they fought great fighters and they beat them.
That's why Larry Holmes was great.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Holmes fought everybody that he could fight, and he beat almost all of them. And he was a champion for over 8 years. I mean, that's really what matters.
Yeah. I mean, now the other argument I want to make, the other argument that, well, since Mayweather beat Pacquiao, that would sort of seal the deal. But I want to give you this comparison. Take Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly the same case, but who is considered the greater heavyweight by most cases?
Lewis.
Lewis, unquestionably. But if you go by, well, Marciano beat Lewis, then you have to say, well, Marciano beat Lewis, he's a greater heavyweight. That's not really the case.
But Lewis was champion 11 years.
Yeah, I mean, I have no let's say, I have no qualms with.
Marciano, in fact, reminds me of Tyson. He was great, but for a limited time and against weakened competition.
Right, but that's not his fault. That's not his, you know, as far as I know. Was there anybody that Marciano, let's say, ducked?
No, not really. Just came up at a time where the opposition was weak.
Yeah, but the only thing I wanted to mention, you know, these are great heavyweights, you know, the legendary heavyweights. But in terms of, well, because Marciano beat Lewis, you're going to say, well, that's not true. That's not necessarily the case. That just because somebody wins a fight, they're automatically the better fighter, or they have less losses or no losses. You know that.
Let me say something that'll be controversial. I've come to this conclusion after a lot of thought and a lot of years. I covered almost every Larry Holmes fight, almost from his pro debut, almost. Muhammad Ali, I covered most of his fights. Larry Holmes was a greater heavyweight champion than Muhammad Ali was.
Wow.
He dominated more. He fought everybody. Now, on the other hand, I would say this. Ali has an excuse, if not that he needs an excuse, but don't forget Ali lost 3.5 years due to the Army Vietnam nonsense.
We talked about
that was the prime time of his career as well.
We talked about that. We talked about the fact that you know, the greatness of Ali, it wasn't even the fact that it was in the ring. You know, I mean, he was a great fighter. Don't get me wrong, but you know, the fact that his refusal to serve. I mean, again, I think that's very significant for.
Ali made history outside the ring. He had social impact. In a way, he reminds me a little bit of Pacquiao. Pacquiao has history and social impact, especially being the biggest hero ever to come from the Philippines.
And by the way, speaking of that, I just remember having this argument with somebody. They said that Mayweather was greater than Ali for the money or whatever. And here's what I said. Here was my argument. I said, like, if Ali would have gone to Vietnam and served, Mayweather might have lost 3.5 years in Desert Storm or in Syria or whatever it is, because if you don't have people like in Ali's generation fighting to end the draft, right? Maybe Mayweather gets drafted. You know, maybe what does he refuse to serve? You know what I mean? So, you know, when people start saying that, I mean, they don't take history into account. That was my point. You know, that I respect Mayweather.
You can only judge any of these guys within their time frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, other than that, it's just barroom talk.
Yeah. I mean, and That's fine. You know,
When I worked at newspapers in Reno and Las Vegas, we'd get these drunks calling in at night. And a guy would say, "Hey, this is Johnny. I'm down at the local bar. What do you want, Johnny?" He says, "Who wins between Marciano and Larry Holmes?" I would say, "Who did you bet?" He said, I bet my friend that Holmes would win. So I say, "Put your friend on and I'll tell him." And the other guy would pick up the phone. He was also drunk. And I'd say, "Marciano wins." And they'd say, and then you'd hear a gunshot.
yeah, I mean, like, listen, these debates, they don't go anywhere, but they're fun. They're fun. This is what, this is part of being a boxing fan. So,
That's why they call it barroom banner.
yeah. And oh, it's that great scene from Coming to America when in the barber shop when they're like, Rocky Marciano, Joe Louis was 137 years old when he fought Rocky Marciano. Remember that scene from Coming to America, having that boxing?
In the barber shop.
Yeah, the barber shop. It's great. It's great. And I I haven't seen the sequel yet, but apparently all those guys are still alive in the sequel. So, all right. So there you have it, Mike. I mean, I don't know. You're saying Pacquiao is the greater fighter. That's
And then the biggest social impact.
okay. So
Mayweather didn't care about social impact. Mayweather's all about the money, baby.
yeah, and in terms of my opinion, I mean, I guess I can't really say social impact determines greatness, in my opinion. Neither does financial success. I do think that ultimately Mayweather might have been the greater fighter, but not because of 50-0, not because he beat Pacquiao.
If Pacquiao becomes president of the Philippines, he goes past Mayweather in the history book because he's gone beyond boxing.
Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to say.
It'd be like saying if Mayweather instead of Biden was president, if Floyd Mayweather became president of the United States, it would be the same for him.
Maybe the other thing I wanted to say.
I don't think Floyd's running though.
No. Well, who knows? I mean, with the last guy, we don't know what's going to happen. The other thing I was going to say was, part of it is also like you self PR. I mean, if you say something often enough, people start repeating it. So if you're going to say you're the greatest ever, the best ever, TBE, blah, 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 people start repeating it. And, whether it's true or not.
Ali was the master of that.
Yeah. He wasn't, like people still tell me, oh, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. I'm like, if you ask people in the know, they say it's like Joe Louis, I mean, Ali's up there. But
I think Louis was the greatest puncher, but not the greatest heavyweight.
Well, right, but you said Holmes was maybe the greater champion, so it's debatable. But everybody says it, greatest because that's what they associate. That's what they heard. They heard greatest, so they say greatest. Same thing with Mayweather. He's trying to sort of build up that image right now. Maybe it's true, but not because he says it, not because of this, that. It's like
let him fight Clarissa Shields.
That'll be
battle of the sexes.